Hey everyone. Oh my God. So I just got the best seat in the house for the Q&A with Zachary, Quinto, and Mike Massimino. I assume you all saw the keynotes this morning, right? Which is why we have such an awesome turnout. So today really it's about talking about whatever you guys want to talk about, the questions you have for space people.
The burning questions.
The burning questions. So, like I was thinking, an astronaut, an actor, and an astrophysicist walk into a video conferencing convention, and the first question that comes to mind is, what is the punchline? So if any of you think of one before the end of this, that would be great. But more importantly is your questions for us. Now, we have about 45 minutes, and because I have the best seat in the house, I get to start asking the questions. You guys know these guys, so let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a research astrophysicist at the City University of New York in New York City. I also do a bit of science communication on YouTube with PBS. I have this show, Space Time. We talk about space and physics and the general awesomeness of the universe. Mostly, though, I'm here to be a bit of a fanboy, but I'm also happy to answer any space questions that you might have. So, when I was thinking about what is my dream conversation between space hero Mike Massimino and the actor's actor, Zachary Quinto, I had many, many ideas, and I threw them all out the window this morning when actually I was listening to you talk, Zach, when you said this one little thing. You talked about your production company. Okay, if you guys were there, Before the Door Productions, right? And about the inspiration for the name Before the Door, which, if I may, and please correct me if I screw this up, but so you went to Carnegie Mellon acting school, and there's this actor training exercise in which they build a door and you stand before the door, and it's all about performing the challenges and overcoming the challenges to go through that door, and they may be different for each different performance, right? And I thought, oh my God, metaphor land, this is incredible. It's like, this is surely one thing that we can all talk about because we've all been through this, very successful people especially, this position of being before a door that you have to throw open and step through, right? And whether it's overcoming your fear to go into space, or no doubt casting aside your personality to assume every psychopathic or otherwise actor wonderful character, so and you guys also. So I thought, all right, we can all relate to this, but this is really about space, okay, because I want it to be. And to me, immediately, I had this notion of collective humanity being before a door, okay, being before the threshold of stepping towards being an interplanetary species, right? And right here we have one of the very few people who've taken those first steps, Mike, and one of the very few people who have lived, albeit fictionally, the future of having made that choice, of having stepped through that door. So I just want to start off by asking you guys, is this actually something that we should do? How important is it for us collectively to take a step like this, to reach for the stars? Should we do space? And because I stole your metaphor, Zach, maybe you can start.
Okay. Well, I don't think we're going to have much of a choice at a certain point if we continue on the path that we're on in terms of our impact on this planet. I think you as scientists would both agree that all of the feedback that we're getting from the community is pointing in the direction that the way that we are damaging our planet is unsustainable, and that we've already passed the point of being able to reverse the impact that we have had and are having. And so it feels like looking beyond our planet is something that's going to have to factor into our sustainability as a species, right? I mean, it seems like we're there or heading there.
Do you mean find a new home?
I don't necessarily mean find a new home, maybe, but I mean, I think that, look, I feel this way, right? Like, life on our planet's going to be unsustainable for large numbers of people. That's not to say that everybody's going to, not everybody's going to survive, but I do feel like we're going to have to find alternatives, and one of the alternatives is certainly looking beyond this planet, right?
Sure.
I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, maybe we throw it to Mike.
I agree, of course, but I think by going to space, it gives us a chance to look back at the planet. We have to come up with a solution for our home planet. As I said, I think I said this in my talk, and we've checked out the neighborhood. There's nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
And any place we else can get to within the next few lifetimes, maybe even, is still relatively close by and not inhabitable. So it's going to be a lot harder to set up a whole nother place to live on Mars for many people than it is for us to take care of our home. So I think we can learn by going to space. I think one of the things we really want to do, it's not just for exploration in the future, and I do think eventually if we can keep ourselves alive long enough and we can develop enough that we can go other places, I think that would be great. But I think that's a long way off. And what we really need to do is use everything that we have, whether it's the space program, all the science we have available to us, all the talent we have in the world, to make sure that we take care of this place. So by going to space, I mean, some of the moon guys, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of Apollo, and they've said, we went to the moon to discover the Earth. It was the first time when they went to the moon on Apollo 8, and they orbited and they saw the Earth rise. And so the most compelling thing you see in space is our planet, and it dominates what you want to look at because it's so beautiful and it's so fragile. So I think exploring space I think it's the coolest thing we can do. I'm very biased, but I think we're really doing it to help our life here on Earth and help understand the things we're doing to our planet and come up with solutions maybe to make this place last longer and take care of it. And I think we can reverse a lot of the bad things that are happening. We don't have an unlimited amount of time, but we don't have much of a choice. And so I think we should use our exploration as a way to help our own planet.
I mean, the interesting thing is I feel like the planet will take care of itself, right? I mean, frankly, we're the problem, right? I think the projections are that without the impact and human interference that's been caused over the last century or the last few generations, it would take the Earth 10,000 years to repair itself without our presence here.
But without our presence, we don't necessarily want.
No, we don't. We don't. But my point is, like, that will take care of itself with or without us. The question is, do we possess the capacity as a civilization, as a species, to recognize and interrupt our own behavior, which is such a challenging notion because it is the thing that sets us apart. Our consciousness, our ambition, right? Our drive.
It's huge. I find it hard enough to go running in the morning. Like, it's not clear how much our personal conscious choice holds sway over our own actions, let alone our collective conscious choice.
Right.
Although we do have at least 3 billionaires right now who are making that choice for us with their own space programs. One is about to speak to us all, and I had the amazing fortune to speak to Richard Branson earlier this year about his own reasons, and he actually kind of echoed everything you said, Mike, which is that unlike, I would say, Musk and Bezos, who want to go to space to expand humanity, Richard Branson's notion is that we go to space to save the Earth, because you can monitor rainforest and reef destruction, you can monitor the atmosphere, you can learn how to terraform Earth or re-terraform Earth much easier than terraforming Mars, for example.
Yeah.
Okay.
It gives you a different perspective. When you see the planet, and we know it's important to take care of it, when you actually see it, and you see the fragility of it, I think it's very impactful. And I think that's maybe one of the things that that he's trying to be getting more people up there, it really does make it.
You were saying that thing in your talk about the atmosphere. When you
it's
see
so
it
thin,
from
right?
there.
You know it's thin, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's fragile. But when you see, like, holy cow, it is really thin, and you can see the fragility of it, and the beauty of it is kind of, you see a paradise, but you see the fragility of it as well. Those are the two words I think that describe it. A fragile paradise, and you realize that we can't exist without that thin atmosphere, and we can change our behavior. It's happened before. The ozone layer had bigger issues years ago. We changed our behavior, and it's healing itself. And so the Earth, like you said, Earth is going to be okay, but we might not be, because we won't give it a chance to heal itself before we run out of time.
Yeah, and as an astrophysicist and having thought about a lot of this stuff professionally, although I know that there may be a lot of life out there, it's 50-50 that there really isn't any. I think there could well be, but there could be nothing. And the tragedy of wasting this one beautiful jewel that the universe created, it's unthinkable.
Yeah, I mean the magnitude of the universe, the sheer unfathomable scale of it is the thing to me that I mean, I'm not saying that there's a parallel world in which people are, driving around in cars and buying things off the internet per se, but just that the idea that there's not the building blocks of life the way that there were billions of years ago here on the planet feels unlikely, right? I mean, what would you feel like it's a 50-50 shot?
Should we get into this right now?
I mean,
we're there.
I'm fascinated.
So, I think, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Fermi paradox, the strange fact that we don't see abundant evidence of alien civilizations, technological civilizations, is actually unusual given the age of the universe. We probably should by now, if they were moderately common. We should have seen their mark on the galaxy, because at least some would have a substantial head start on us, and we know how fast we're moving, right? And so that, combined with some kind of abstract statistical arguments about the fact that, of course, we're going to be in the one place where life exists, tells me that it could be 50-50 given the lack of evidence. So I think.
But when you say we would see evidence of those advanced civilizations, do you mean what form would that take? Like satellites or radio signals, or what? So
we're about to potentially build the first interstellar probe that will be able to travel at 10% the speed of light. Okay, this is the Breakthrough Starshot program. The idea is you build this giant array of lasers and you blast these little probes that are that sail on those light beams. And this is, a lot of famous good people, including the late Stephen Hawking, were on this science advisory. It's the Yuri Milner, the Russian billionaires, spearheading this. And it could well happen, in which case we could have sent our first probes to planets. They'll be there in 40, 50 years, okay? But given that our galaxy is 10 billion years old, if there was one other civilization that came, a tiny fraction of that before, they could have literally covered our galaxy in probes like that many, many, many times over. And so these sorts of realizations make you realize that, all right, not once has anyone reached that scale to spread these things through the galaxy. They may have reached lesser scales for sure, but I mean,
but that's just in our neighborhood.
That's it, but,
right?
but that's the whole galaxy.
How many galaxies? I'm glad we have an expert here. How many galaxies? Like usually I throw out a number like
billion.
In the 93 billion light year observable universe, a couple of 100 billion.
100 billion.
Right.
Yeah.
And most of those, and they have how many stars in each? Like lots
the same
of stars.
number, yeah.
Like billions of stars.
Hundreds of billions of stars.
And most of which have planets around them.
So the question is.
The
question is.
There might be something somewhere.
Yeah, but they're so far away. The question is, can we possibly ever make contact?
Yeah.
I feel like if you guys have more questions on are there aliens, we can get to that. But it's my turn to ask questions, which
we commandeered the.
I know you guys get to ask. So the one thing I really like on this point and stretching the metaphor of stepping through the door, Mike, you said that you had a fear of heights.
Yeah.
Right. And.
Yeah, I don't like them.
It's like. So you were standing at the metaphorical door of stepping onto the space shuttle well, the literal door also, and you didn't get back on the bus, you stepped on the space shuttle, but you didn't tell us what happened after. At some point, you are hanging above the orb of the Earth in your spacesuit, like utterly dependent on intricate human technology for your life.
Yeah.
And when I imagine being in space, which I do all the time, like I imagine this sense of incredible vertigo, also both literal and metaphorical, like you're so far away from home and help. How did that feel?
Well, as far as the height, I don't like looking over the side of a building or walking along like a bridge. Like there's a high bridge by the Hoover Dam that you can walk. I don't like that. Yeah. I don't like being near the edge when you're looking. But as long as I'm moving, I'm okay. If it's a zip line or an airplane or a spaceship that's moving, for whatever reason, the fear in my brain, which doesn't always, our brain does things to us, right? And the fear kicks in when it thinks I might fall and I don't like it, right? But as long as I'm moving, I'm okay. So I was fine moving during a spacewalk, looking down at the planet. The only time I felt a little bit nervous, my brain, when it kicked in, was when I was high on the telescope above the payload bay of the space shuttle, which was about 60 feet down. And then I was like, oh, and I had the death grip on, and I was like, why am I, if I let go, I know I'm just going to float away, and it wasn't going to fall.
As long as the height is above a certain amount,
as long as I'm moving. See, I was relative to that.
Well, and you're moving at
a lot of astronauts have this.
Many thousands of miles per hour.
Yeah.
In orbit.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I'm fine in an airplane. I'm fine in a spaceship. I just don't like looking over the. And some are, believe it or not, there are some that are worse than I am. There's a test pilot friend of mine, astronaut, who is worse than I am, walking around like scaffolding and stuff like that we had to do our training around the spaceship. So,
wow.
But I think the point of all that is that all of us have things that we're going to have to get over, and there may be certain fears you have, whatever it might be, and if you have something you really want to do, there is going to be things that are going to get in that way. Whatever it is, if you want to be an actor or a physicist or whatever it is that you want to do, there's going to be things you're going to have to get over. And for me, it was, I wasn't comfortable with a lot of the things I had to do as an astronaut, but I just did it and tried to get help when I could, and so I think that's the point of all that, is that all of us have issues, right? And they should not stand between you and your dream.
What about you, Zach? Any issues?
Sure.
Or any big doors you had to step through, or giant leaps of faith?
I mean, I can remember certainly a time in my career feeling like I had to cultivate a belief in myself when I didn't necessarily feel like anybody else believed in me, and that was essential to pass through that faith, to cultivate that foundation that I could then stand on, and that was a huge part of my coming of age, I would say, my late 20s, early 30s. Before I really started working a lot, But yeah, I feel like life is really about excavating our issues, really. I mean, I think for me, anyway, digging deeper and understanding myself and how I evolve and what informs who I am, and that changes, right? I mean, I think we are a collection of our experiences, and so how we look at them and how we process them defines how we move through the world. So I welcome that stuff. I like to look at that stuff, and I like to go as deep as I can.
So that brings something to mind, actually. So Mike's already talked about his experience seeing the beautiful orb of the Earth and the unifying experience, the overview effect that kind of generated in you. But you're an actor. My sense is that acting in film is your craft and your calling, but you suddenly found yourself involved with these very smart, speculative and science-connected projects. How have these things like Star Trek influenced your view of the universe, your take on reality?
Yeah. I think Star Trek is a very unique franchise to be a part of, and it was born out of the imagination of a true visionary, Gene Roddenberry, who created it, who had an unwavering faith in humanity and a belief in what we're capable of, and some of the ethos and tenets of the Star Trek universe are pretty remarkable. I think they're actually really solid. You know, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. The idea of putting aside differences, unifying, working together for the betterment of humanity. These are all notions that I think are as relevant today as they were 50 years ago. And I feel honored to be a part of a franchise that tells stories in that spirit.
It's a unique, utopic future that people seem afraid to depict these days.
Yeah.
It's not cool enough.
Yeah, right. And it's brought generations together. You know, when I go and meet fans at premieres or events, or see people around the world, it's a remarkable thing to see grandparents and their grandkids, or parents and their kids, all of whom sort of shared the experience of Star Trek together, coming to meet us or to experience what it is that we're doing with the stories these days. It's great. It's a great thing to be a part of. So I feel, the science of it is all very interesting, and the what's possible is all very interesting. And yeah, I feel like I'm always looking for those points of connection, those unity points in human experience. That what is it that sets us apart from the rest of the biological world, and how can we thrive in that?
If there was one piece of Star Trek technology that you could actually take back to real life besides Spock ears,
I think
what would it be?
the transporter, right? I mean, I think the opportunity to just beam yourself somewhere would be pretty awesome.
It'd be so cool.
Yeah.
I mean, we would be instantly very global. We wouldn't need Zoom anymore.
That's true.
Except Zoom could then move into like holodeck technology. And
Yeah, of course.
They would lead the way.
Yeah.
If there was one piece of Star Trek or other sci-fi technology that you could have taken on your missions with you.
Well, to take on my missions, the transporter would have killed the fun of the launch. Although I would have maybe felt, if it was reliable, a little safer.
Got to sit on top
while
of an
this was
exploding
going
bomb.
on. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's my same answer, is being able to get from place to place. I think that's what's limiting us in being able, not only getting around New York City, getting across town is impossible. We need a gondola or something. So that would have been great for that. But really getting places more easily throughout our, like you were mentioning this past way with the lasers that we're gonna, that idea is cool. But it's still, I mean, to get people and things, we need a big breakthrough in propulsion. So the warp speed, I guess maybe the warp speed. Yeah, that's a good one. There you go. Transport is good for getting around town, but that warp speed, man, we really need that. We need to be able to move around. And that's why we can't find anybody, because we're just, we can't get out of the neighborhood. It's really hard. So yeah, I'm gonna go with that. That's my answer, the warp speed.
Well, you stole my answer. I thought you might say a sonic screwdriver, given some of the trouble you sometimes have.
I would have messed that up. See, that wouldn't have prevented me from messing something up. But can I tell a quick Star Trek story? I told Zach this earlier. Do you mind?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was telling, when that Star Trek movie came out, the first one that you did, I can remember the date. I think it was like May. I think I knew about it like May 8th, and that's because I launched on May 11th, I think, or something like. Anyways, right around that time, and I was going down. I was getting flown down to the Cape for my flight by Mark Kelly, my friend, who was telling me that after he dropped me off we were going into quarantine in my launch, he was going to go and see that movie. And I was like, geez, we're not going to be able to see that movie. We're going to be in space. Now, the movie was really good, but given a choice, we were going to go to space, right? And we weren't going to make, because our bosses would have been like, oh, you really want to watch the movie instead of going there for real? Like, we didn't, so. But our training team, I think, picked up that this movie was, they knew that it was coming out and that we were going to be fans of the movie, but we were going to be in space when it came out and wouldn't be able to see it. So as a special treat, the studio arranged something with NASA and sent a copy of the movie and loaded it on our computers. This had to be done a few weeks, and was a surprise, right, for us to watch at some point when we had time. And we had no time during a mission, and we were coming the night before our landing, and we hadn't seen the movie, and someone said, we haven't watched that movie yet. And our commander is nervous about us going to bed because he's got to land the spaceship the next day. And we're like, oh, come on, can't we watch it? Kind of like kids with their dad. And the commander's like the dad. We can act immaturely because we have a commander. So he's like, no, you got to go to bed. And we're like, please, please. So he lets us watch the movie. And the way they loaded it was in pieces. Because it's, however long, it was a few years, it was 10 years ago. So it was like in 30-minute chunks. So he goes, all right, you can watch the first 30 minutes. So we're sitting there, we're all floating around watching this movie on the middeck. And Houston, I think, thinks we're getting ready to go to bed, and we have nothing, and we're watching this movie. Zach's great, and we're watching this thing. And then at 30 minutes end, we're like, oh, and he's like, we got to go to bed. We're like, come on, Scooter. He goes, all right, I'll watch it more. We watched the whole thing. We just kept putting it on there. So
Binged it.
thanks for that. And the landing went really well.
Yeah.
So I think if we didn't watch that movie, I'm not so sure how it would have happened. So thanks for that.
I think there might have been lessons of caution in spaceship flying in that movie. I'm not sure it was something to emulate.
Yeah, right.
You got to be, well, yeah, you can't, yeah. I think it worked out all right, though.
Amazing. So I want to ask one more question before I open it up to you guys. So Mike Massimino fixed the Hubble Space Telescope twice, and I've said it before, but thank you. And I'm sorry we kept breaking our toy.
Yeah. See, whenever I meet thank you very much. Whenever I meet an astrophysicist, particularly, it's like, can you imagine if I'd have broke the thing on him, which I almost did? Like, this wouldn't be a pleasant conversation. Like, you idiot, I had my research. So I'm so grateful so I can meet astrophysicists and not run.
I mean,
yeah.
It's hard to overstate,
Yeah.
or to even accurately state the number of mysteries that have been unlocked due to instruments that Mike installed on the Hubble Space Telescope. And yet, the universe is still full of mysteries that, we're going to launch new satellites and stuff, but it's so full of mysteries. I'm curious if we could learn one thing about the universe. What would you learn, Mike?
If we could learn one thing about the universe.
One big unknown.
I think we've answered a lot of questions, but we still have. To me, the big thing is: are we alone?
Yeah.
Is that a reasonable answer?
Perfect.
I think that's it. I think that I was thinking when we had the 50th anniversary of Apollo, and I mentioned in my talk, I was 6 years old when it happened, so I can remember it, and it was a huge event. And I think there was always this feeling at NASA, like, well, what we're doing now is really cool too. Yeah, but we're not landing on the moon. And I think it's okay that the moon landing stays above everything else that we've done. I think that that's perfectly fine. I think it was that historic, that amazing that they did the first time we left the planet and went somewhere else and came back, which was a good thing too. But it's the first time we actually left and went somewhere else and stepped on another place. And no matter where else we go, it's still not going to be like the first time we actually did that. And I was thinking about what would kind of capture the world like the moon landing did. Maybe Mars will. I think a lot of people think we've already been to Mars, but that was only a movie, right? We haven't been there yet. But I think when we discover if there is life somewhere else, I think that's the next big thing.
Everything.
So I'll go with that one.
That would be mine too.
That'll be yours too.
Yeah.
All right. Easy. Mine is the other question. So I don't know if you know this, but in astronomy, it is often said that every question in the field should be reduced to one of two questions, or should stem from one of two questions. Are we alone? And where did we come from?
There's another one.
So I'm a where did we come from guy.
Yeah.
Like, I want to know how the universe formed, got to how it is, why we have galaxies, why we have stars, what came before the Big Bang, all that stuff. Okay, so
Yeah.
big question. I'm giving myself the right to answer my own question. What happened before there was anything?
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we throw it open. I don't know if we have a system for this. Maybe we just, hands up. First hand I saw.
Hello, Mike and Zachary. Nice to see you up there. And Matt, thank you for hosting this. My question was especially, Mike, a follow-up to what you were talking about with watching Star Trek.
Yeah.
On the space shuttle up there.
Yeah.
Do you know if that was the first time Star Trek was viewed in space?
Oh, I doubt it.
Okay.
I think for that movie, yes.
Well,
that movie, because it had just come out. So no one beat us to that one.
Okay.
I'm sure we were the first ones. But we like, there are some, especially on space station. Now, my flights were on shuttle for 2 weeks. Space station, you're up there for longer periods of time. And I think like on Mir, they used to have a movie night on Fridays, and you try to continue and do things as a group that you would do. So movies astronauts like everybody else loves movies. I flew a few of my favorite DVDs in space and took pictures of them, like the Right Stuff and Apollo 13. We were watching Apollo 13. Some of my crewmates were watching Apollo 13. That's probably not a good idea. What happened in our flight, we actually were delayed. Our landing day was delayed by we thought we were going to land one day, and then the weather was bad, and we got stuck in space. And after we watched Star Trek, actually, the landing occurred a couple days later. We thought we were landing that next morning. But what happened is the weather was bad and we got stuck in space. And by definition, there was nothing to do because everything was packed. All the computers were put away. The toilet was shut down. We had to turn the toilet back on, get the galley going again to spend an extra day in space. And then that happened a second day. And I thought these are the 2 of the best days of my life because we had nothing to do but look out the window and listen to music. Some of my, and I thought the Star Trek experience was great. Some of my crewmates, though, were a little bit, I don't know what the right, a little more hyper than I am, or they needed something to do. And they needed something to do. And so they started watching more movies. What do you got? And we got this. And they were watching movies after we did they had like set up a theater down on the middeck. And I'm on the flight deck, plastered to the window. At this one point, we were flying over Australia at night, and I was watching thunderstorms below me. Absolutely spectacular. And my buddy Drew Feusel, if you saw if you saw my presentation, the guy that made the burrito, calls up. He says, "Hey, Mass," and I'm looking at this amazing thing. He goes, "Hey, Mass," I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Come on down." I'm like, down to the midday. I go, "Why?" He goes, "We're gonna watch Nacho Libre," and I said, "I'll watch it when we land." So for Star Trek, I made the exception, but Nacho Libre, as much as I like that movie, I was going to keep looking out the window.
And Zachary, I had a follow-up for you. I was just curious. Obviously, you haven't had the opportunity to go in space yet. I hope you do if you want to. But I was curious, when was the first time you ever had been exposed or watched an episode of any of the different maturations of Star Trek? When was the first time you saw a Star Trek episode?
I think it was, I was probably like 10 or 11, and it was the original series. That was the one that I watched most of. I mean, I watched it all once I got cast in the role, but I had seen that show more than any of the others by the time I was older. Yeah.
By the way, the radio transmissions from the original series have now passed hundreds of star systems, so it could be that actually it's been watched in space many times.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
I'm just saying.
See?
Question over here.
It's on.
Yeah, we got it.
So this is actually a question from my daughter, so I'm going to record it. She asked me, how can we impact what's going on with the Earth, with climate change and everything like that? And I gave her my IT analyst, answer of recycle. But from people in your positions, what would you recommend? She's an 11-year-old girl, so not too technical, please.
Zach, you got something?
Well, I mean, I think, there's a lot at stake, and I think for the younger generation to take responsibility for the planet that they're going to inherit, and not only take responsibility themselves, but also take responsibility to hold adults accountable. There's that incredible young woman, Greta Thunberg from Sweden, yes? Yeah. Who's really beating this drum, and I feel incredibly inspired by watching her talk to adults, because it's really going to fall to your daughter and her friends, and I feel like stepping up and making sure that that they're doing their part individually by recycling and by making responsible choices, and also by holding us accountable as the generation who is currently on guard.
Yeah, and the reality is that stopping using plastic straws isn't enough. It's really holding adults, and by adults, I also mean governments and corporations to account. And I think the young voice is really, it's the future in all the ways. So it's up to you, please.
And I think using technology, for people who are inclined in developing technological solutions, for example, electric cars were something people thought about for many years, and it really wasn't feasible until recently, where now the battery technology, and you have to build the battery, and that can affect the environment and all this. But I think we're getting closer as we develop more of these technological solutions, and if the government can help, if we can have our leaders in our various nations try to help that along a bit, whatever they can, because I think there's a lot of times there's a risk in developing those types of technologies. but ones that are more sustainable, learning more about the effect that we're having with the technology we're using or the way that we're producing whatever we're producing. I think as young people get involved in those sorts of, if they're inclined in a technological way or whatever their way is, to keep in mind how they can contribute to this and spread the knowledge, the truth of what it is that we're doing and what we can do to prevent it. As it becomes more feasible and less expensive to implement some of these solutions, I think we're going to see more and more of them. Alternative energy sources, for example, they're going to be coming along, and I think we're going to have sustainable transportation and in the future because of that. So if she's inclined to, if she's a tech kid, please help us. We need as much help as we can.
Yeah. I think we have a question over here.
Hi, thank you. Quick question. Sir Richard and Musk and Bezos all have kind of different views of the future of space, and kind of curious what you guys think, maybe 5, 10, 50 years down the road. Do you think there'll be thousands or millions of people in space in the future?
Oh, me? So I think some of the billionaires are optimistic. I think that Mars is hard. It's not going to be a nice place to live for in the foreseeable short or medium term. I think having bases on the Moon and Mars is real smart, and for the purpose of science and also for the purpose of investigating future possibilities. But we're not going to turn Mars into Earth. It's also, as much as we might like to imagine as though we lived in a Star Trek utopic future, the future is going to be driven by short-term motives, and at the moment that's money. So colonizing Mars, there's no money in it at all. It has to be done, at the moment at the whim or the dream of individuals. One area where I see there's an enormous money is asteroid mining. If that can be done, the potential profits are unthinkably large. They say that the first trillionaire will be an asteroid miner. So I think we need to factor that into account. So maybe the future is more like The Expanse than like Star Trek, where there'll be gold rushes. I mean, just in the same way that the US was populated by Europeans through things like gold rushes. People rushed in and staked their claims. And I think one thing like the asteroid belt, and I think potentially the Moon is profitable also. But we need to moderate that, because that's potentially an ugly future, just like the Wild West was pretty wild. So yeah, that's my feeling about what the first momentum will be. Do you guys have?
I hope Richard Branson, we're going to speak to him soon, or we're going to hear him talk. With what they're doing and what Jeff Bezos is doing with Blue Origin and Elon Musk with SpaceX, and there's other entrepreneurial companies out there too. But let's say those big three, I really hope they're very successful. Richard Branson has launched a couple test pilots into space these last few months, and Jeff Bezos' company is, I think, doing really well. I think we're right on the brink of going from a government-run only program and exploration to where now it's going to be governments still going, but I think we're at the point where a lot of the privatization is going to start clicking in. I'm hoping the 2020s are going to be like the roaring 2020s, and it's going to open up the possibilities in space travel. It may mainly be around our planet, but I think it could be huge. Going from like we had airplanes were mainly used for military purposes and then for barnstorming 100 years ago, and now we have a thriving commercial airline industry. I hope that's where we are right now, that we're at a point where it's going to start moving toward a lot of advancement in what commercial companies can do, and they can figure out ways to be profitable in exploring space, and I hope that's where we are. They're doing incredible things. They really are. I got a chance to take a look at Blue Origin a couple weeks ago. A couple of my buddies that I flew in space with are working for that company now, and they are doing some wonderful things, a lot of successes. They haven't flown people yet, but I think they're close. And then 2 days after that, I went to the Michoud Assembly Facility to see the Space Launch System. It is a gigantic rocket that is being built that can go beyond low Earth orbit to the moon and beyond. And these things are real. They're really happening. And hopefully we're going to see that taking place over this next decade. So I'm very hopeful that the 2020s are going to be very exciting.
Over here.
I have a quick question about Zoom phone and the technology. No, I'm just kidding. Zachary, I have a question for you. It's kind of generic, and my apologies, but what was your favorite role in your entire career and why?
You know, I've had, my favorite film role is definitely Spock, just because of the impact it had on my life, both personally and professionally. You know, the friends I made in that franchise are some of my closest friends to this day, and the experiences that I had with that were pretty special, remarkable. But I think my favorite experience, just in general creatively, was playing Tom Wingfield in The Glass Menagerie in 2013 and 14, first in Boston, then on Broadway. Just, you know, it was my Broadway debut. It was like kind of my lifelong dream being realized, and in such a profound and unique experience that I think that's the one that kind of resonates for me the most. Yeah.
Hi guys. First of all, thank you very much for this inspirational. It's really incredible to hear your stories. This question is for Mike, and it's when you sir have been in space, if your perspective about religion has changed, it has enforced. If you think there is a creator, what are your perspective in that?
Yeah, I've talked to some of my crewmates about this too. I think that the idea of a creator or religion, I think you have those beliefs and you take those beliefs with you. And the way you interpret what you see, I think, is based on your belief system. So I think, to me, it was just how you interpret things. If you're a believer and you believe in God and you believe in religion, and then what you see when you see from space, you can interpret in that way. But I think others, a lot of my friends who are astronauts are not, don't believe necessarily in religion. I think most of us are generally spiritual people, but maybe not in a certain religion or whatever, and they'll see it a little bit differently. And I think that that's okay. So I don't know of any astronaut who went to space and became religious or went to space and didn't become religious. Just in my conversations, and the way I feel about it is that you have certain ways that you interpret things, and you bring those with you to space, and so you can interpret whatever what you're looking at from that lens. I don't see any conflict being a believer or not being a believer. I think it's just the way you interpret things.
I was just going to say maybe a flat Earther would have a changed opinion.
Yeah, flat Earth I don't understand. There's other things to worry about, I think. But
everyone can make up stories to justify. I think we've got time for a couple more questions. So I think our mic holders are choosing, so.
Thank you. Now this is a question for all of you. Matt, I know you mentioned fiction and stuff being very dystopian. I had the fortune to visit the Intrepid this summer, and it kind of, honestly, it brought a tear to my eye seeing that pop culture and media can actually influence scientific thought and discovery. Well, how important do you think it is that we swing back to, like, I guess, not even utopian, but just something kind of a little more hopeful to inspire a next generation? And then also, next question, can I get a picture with all three of y'all eventually?
The answer to both is yes. Wait, I'm going to just be very quick. I think that fiction informs the future. I think speculative works shape the zeitgeist, and in many intangible ways that shapes our future.
And also scientific outreach.
Super important. Super important.
I feel like I feel like narratives and stories are reflective, as much as they're reflective of the future. They're certainly reflective of the time that we live in, and so I think people need a place to go to wrestle with the challenges that we face, and oftentimes that gets projected into our narrative stories and our landscapes, and I think that's important. But I do think we need to cultivate faith in ourselves and in one another. I think in the stories that we tell as much as we can, and yeah, that's something that I think we should all be mindful of in what we choose to watch and what we choose to make.
That was good.
Yeah, you want to follow that? Cool.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. This has been wonderful. A question about how concerned are you about space junk and pollution of space, and do you see that may potentially limit our ability to continue to effectively explore?
Yeah, so are we okay with this clock, because it's counting up now on us?
It's not going to explode.
It's not okay. Right. Space junk is a real problem, and it's gotten worse and worse for various reasons. But it is an issue with Hubble. For example, with Hubble, walking on a telescope, you could see where it was impacted. One of the instruments we replaced was a wide field planetary camera, which had an exposed radiator. So when we pulled it out, the radiator came with it, came back to Earth, and I got to view it at JPL a few months after the mission, and it looked like it was peppered with a BB gun. It was just ding. What it was, a little micrometeor had knocked into it, and you could see some of that evidence of where the telescope was hit while it was in space. And you're like, okay, I hope that no one else is coming. I hope there's no brother or sister rocks that are coming to hit me after that. So, but things get hit, and it's gotten worse. I think just like we have to be concerned about polluting our planet, we need to be concerned about polluting the area around our planet. One of the things we did on our flight was to attach a docking mechanism to the telescope, that when its life is over, there's going to be an uncrewed vehicle to attach to it, a rocket motor, to guide it back down safely into the atmosphere, and into most of it will, and at such an attitude that it will pretty much disintegrate in the atmosphere. So we have to take responsibility for things that you launch, and we're getting to the point where it is getting very crowded up there. Even though there's still a lot of space, relatively speaking, there is that danger of knocking into things. It is being tracked by the Space Command in Colorado. Things about the size of a golf ball or larger can be tracked, and you can avoid those things typically. And they've gotten really good about predicting orbits and where that stuff is going to be. And it used to be more of an issue years ago, but now it's become pretty good. Where you can do the maneuver way ahead of time. The ground usually can control it, and we haven't had many incidents. But as we put more things in space, we're going to have more things to worry about not knocking into. But it is a huge problem. There's no easy solutions to it, but we have to at least recognize it and try to make sure it doesn't get really out of control, because it's getting to the point where there's a lot of stuff up there. We got to be careful.
So I think we're a few minutes over. I guess this would be a great time to wrap up, and thanks to Mike and Zachary and to you guys for being an awesome audience with your great questions.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.